Hi, and welcome to show number 37 of the Cafecito Travel Talks, a podcast where people share travel stories and adventures. My name is Tony Lloyd, and I'm your host. For today's show, we catch up with George from show number 33, titled The Start of the Journey. In this show, he's in the Lima airport on his way to Cuenca, Ecuador. We'll hear about what it's like for him to travel during the time of Corona. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that you could donate to the show, even as little as $1. Please take a look at the podcast notes to see how you could do so. Our Facebook page has the written stories, and if you're someone who likes to write or have an idea for a future show, please send me an email to elcafecitotraveltalks@gmail.com. Questions, comments, any observations on how I could improve on this show could also be sent to elcafecitotraveltalks@gmail.com. I'd like to thank all the people who've been listening from all over. Special shout out going to Turkey, Finland, Japan, Switzerland, South Africa, and many others that are listening in different parts of the world. For now, please get yourself a cup of coffee or a tea and enjoy today's show. Okay, George, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. I am one plane trip away and a 4-hour bus ride away, finally getting to see you and getting to experience beautiful Cuenca, so I'm pretty happy.
Okay, so the last time we talked, you were still at home in Canada and you had just finished up your work there. So what's happened since then? Update us.
You know, first of all, I slightly failed, I got to be honest, because I didn't realize how intricate and different these COVID, I guess, rules and regulations and processes and procedures were. I guess I relied too much on the airlines, and I had too much faith. And what happened to me originally is, when I left Vancouver, when I left Canada, my flights were all booked, and I was going Vancouver, Mexico City, Lima, and then Lima, Ecuador. And when I landed in Mexico City and I went to board my flight or go to check in to my flight to Lima, they asked me for my COVID test. And I said, what are you guys talking about? And they said that, everybody who was getting on a plane going to, especially Lima, Peru, which I didn't know, had one of the strictest protocols in place, where you needed to have a test within the last 72 hours to be eligible to even get on the plane. And there's no negotiating. There was nothing that you can do. And trust me, I tried. So basically, I stayed in Mexico City for 4 days, and I have a friend in Mexico City, so it worked out well. And I got my it's a PCR test, I believe it's called. It's nasal swabs, extremely uncomfortable, 24-hour results. And, good news is I don't have COVID. So then I rebooked my flights 4 days later. LATAM Airlines was extremely kind, very kind. They, at no cost at all, they just, changed the dates for me. Then I jumped on a plane to Mexico City yesterday, from Mexico City to Lima yesterday. And now today I'm on my way to Ecuador.
Okay, and right now, as we're talking, you're sitting in the waiting room.
Yes, sir. I'm about 2 hours away from boarding. I've passed security. I am in the airport right now.
Okay, let's break it down a little bit. For the people who might be thinking of traveling at this time right now, let's talk a little bit about what's it like going through the airports, what the planes are like, what are some of the procedures that are going on right now?
And yeah, that's a really good point, Tony, because actually myself too, I've let my followers on Facebook and whatnot know that every single country in the United States, as an example, every single state has its different rules and regulations and different protocols. So it's really important that you do you perform your due diligence before you jump on a plane and not just listen to rumors. There's websites. And an example, LATAM Airlines, if anybody's planning on traveling to South America, I would strongly suggest that you go onto their website, and they have a list with every single country that they fly to and what those rules and regulations are. And as an example, Lima is one of the strictest, if not the strictest. And in the airport, and I mean, they take this seriously, and I respect that. I mean, they're protecting their people, but in the airport, it's mask mandatory at all times. And I'm telling you, I took my mask off for literally 2 minutes, just for a little bit of a breather. And somebody comes up to you and tells you, security comes and says, you need to put your mask on. And in the plane, in LATAM Airlines, on the positive note, there's nobody sitting next to you. There's about 20 to 30% capacity on the flights, except in the flight for LATAM Airlines going anywhere like Peru, Ecuador, stuff like that. In the plane, it's mask and face shield mandatory. And I found out that Colombia, I was speaking to a gentleman here today who was from Chile, but who travels all around South America, and he was explaining to me that in Colombia, it's eye protection, so you need safety glasses, shield, and mask. So, each place has its own requirements. So anybody who's planning on traveling, I would strongly suggest to do your due diligence because you might end up 4 extra days in Mexico City like I did.
Okay. The face mask that you talk about, they gave it to you, or you had to go out to the duty free and buy your own? Or is there some
Actually,
guy outside at the front of the plane selling them for, yeah, on a two for $1, two for $1? Come and get it now. Come and get it now.
actually, you know what, Tony? That's a really good question. And this is what happened to me. So short answer is you got to get it yourself. And, you know, that's the short answer. They don't provide face shields, but my mask, the elastic strap on my, or the band on my mask broke in the plane, and they have other masks, you know, so for mask replacements, it's not a big deal, but the shield itself, again, I wasn't aware of that, right? So LATAM Airlines, you know, I had my COVID test done and everything was great. I get my boarding pass and I go to walk away, and I guess they knew, you know, that if I didn't know about the COVID test, I probably didn't know about the shield. And I was in the Mexico City airport, and one of the employees for LATAM Airlines, you know, they were great once again, said, "Listen, sir, you need to have a face shield." And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah." And there was an area in the airport, there was a pharmacy that sold them. So, and I think if I remember correctly, it was like $10. So
Wow.
it's probably, yeah, wow. It's for a little piece of plastic. I mean, it's quite expensive. So it probably best to, like, again, you know, due diligence. And I failed on that part, but, you know, live and learn.
Yeah, it's always important anytime that you're traveling that people do check on certain informations, not only for the countries, but also for the airlines. I think that's really important because sometimes you might have 2 or 3 airlines flying to the same destination, and each one of them might have a different regulation within the airlines themselves also.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how about what's the feeling been like? You just mentioned that you spoke to a guy from Chile flying around South America quite a bit. You know, usually at least myself, when I'm flying and I'm traveling, I'm always chit-chatting to other people. And, you know, of course, it's a bit annoying sometimes to be squeezed in between 2 people, but at the same time, I usually use it as the advantage to meet the people beside me in the airplane. What's that feeling been like on the airplane with your fellow passengers?
Fellow travelers, you know, it's really strange because even in the airports, it's social distancing, right? So social distancing and masks. And, you know, speaking for Lima, because I'm here right now, it's extremely, it's really serious. Like there's footprints, like, you know, there's stickers on the floor indicating where you're allowed to stand. I mean, on the escalators themselves, literally on the escalators, there's red steps. You know, there's distance between the steps on the escalators that indicate that you're not allowed to be on those steps. And even on the airplane, it's social distancing, and it feels a little bit, how can I put it? It's like ghost towns. You know, the airports are half empty. The planes are 20, like I said, 20 to 30% capacity. So is that the intimacy, you know, that sometimes you get when you're traveling with your co-travelers and stuff, you don't, you know, you feel like you're distanced, and everybody kind of is, I'm going to say, is awkward to talk to each other because of the social distancing, right? And this gentleman that I was speaking to, as an example, I was at the hotel in Lima, right at the airport, and we were outside. We were sitting outside, and he was at his table. I was at my table. We were having breakfast, and you know, we struck up a conversation, and you know, we hit it off. We were both from the construction industry, and anyway, so we get up to exchange information or whatnot, and for a split second, we forgot. You know, for a split second, it's like we were all alone, and we kind of forgot about the COVID. And all of a sudden I saw, like, he clicked, you know, and he jumped back, you know, 4 feet away, and he put his mask on, and then when he left, you know, we didn't shake hands, we bumped elbows, and so, you know, it's a little bit different, you know, it's a little bit different. But I got to tell you, I'm still grateful that at least we can travel, and that you know, we get to move around. But I tell you, it's really weird to be in airports that are like ghost towns and planes that are only 20% full.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like each person is looking at the other like you could be the potential
Yeah.
passer of COVID to me.
Yeah. Listen, it's so strange. And the funny thing is, everybody in this airport, everybody had to have a COVID test. Nobody in this airport you're not allowed in the airport. You know, you could not get onto a plane. You can't pass security unless you have a COVID test in the past 72 hours. But it's like people forget that, and everybody treats each other like, you know, no, you know, maybe you're the one. You know, but I mean, it's the times of today, right?
One of the things that I've heard recently, they say that in the airplanes, that because the airplane naturally changes its air every, I don't know, few minutes.
3 minutes.
Every 3 minutes, there we go. So maybe, you know, you could explain that. Currently, right now, they say that the airplanes are actually the safest place to be anywhere, because since the air is being changed constantly.
Actually, it's funny you say that. Yesterday in the airplane in LATAM, the pilot, he specifically, one of the announcements is now about the air system and the filtration systems in the plane. And the pilot himself, during his takeoff announcement, and he's telling the weather and the altitude you'll be flying and how long it's going to take you. He also mentions that every 3 minutes, that's why I remember, because it happened to me yesterday, where at 99.9% of all bacteria and and everything gets filtered out, and it's clean air every 3 minutes. So you're right, the cleanest air right now, and probably the safest place to be, would be in an airplane.
Okay, so there you go, everyone. Anyone who wants to go traveling, it's time to start traveling. Okay.
Exactly, and go to Ecuador.
And go to Ecuador, exactly. Well, actually, in Ecuador, just to let you know, just to give you a heads up on that, we are not allowed to go outside without a mask. It's an $80 fine. There are footsteps all over the place, the social distancing. And yes, it's true. Every so often, you're in a situation where people sort of forget, and they're like, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, yeah, we're supposed to be social distancing. But in general, here, from what I understand, there's been one or two Americans that I've ran into recently, and they've said that in the States, there's not that much restriction like there is here in Ecuador. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of restrictions here. Everybody will spray your hand. Everybody will check your so you'll in one given day, you might get your temperature checked at least 10 times. So get ready for that.
And you know what, Tony, same thing in Mexico City. Although Mexico City, as let's say, as an airport, so as a gateway, so coming in and out of Mexico City, no problem. But the city itself was actually extremely well organized and strict. 7 o'clock, no alcohol. I walked into a restaurant, a nice restaurant. And I walked in at 6:59. By the time I washed my hands and I sat down to the table, it was 7:03. I went to order a bottle of wine and they said no. And the gentleman next to me, had beer on the table. He had ordered it, 10 minutes before me, and they adamantly refused. And I tried a couple times. Originally I didn't know that there was a curfew for alcohol. Previous day also, which I was later, was like 9 o'clock. They said no. And I mean, they don't mess around. So although it's easier to get into Mexico, when you're in Mexico City itself, you can't enter any building without a mask. And everybody in the street, not say 95% of everybody walking around still wears masks. And the social distancing and, et cetera, and et cetera. So yeah, it's different times for sure.
Very much so. So you get on the plane from Vancouver, you said, right? You get to Mexico City, they tell you cannot board the other plane. And now you have 4 days in Mexico. So tell us about some of the things that you were up to during that time. Because at the end of the day, we could say, okay, yeah, we are spending 4 days in a place we didn't plan on spending on, but that sometimes could be an adventure within itself.
It was, you know what, Tony? It was. And the funny thing, the greatest adventure was getting a COVID test. I mean, I speak Spanish a little bit. The words I know pronounce them very well. And sometimes that throws people off. So when I introduce myself and I say, hola, ¿cómo está? They think, and then they just start talking to me like I speak Spanish fluently. So for somebody, thank God I had a friend who lives in Mexico City, because again, I was on a deadline. I wanted to come see you. I need to come to Ecuador. And, the longer I stay in Mexico City, it hurts the budget. That wasn't part of the plan. So, my mission was find a COVID test. You get a COVID test and, get it and get the results like in 24 hours. It's not that easy, and like I said, my adventure, big part of it was, to get my test. And then I'm a foodie. I really like food. So I spent most of my time trying different restaurants and going to mariachi bars and drinking some mezcal. So I definitely had a good time.
Okay. So you got off the plane, you contacted your friend. How did you actually find your COVID test? I know that, of course, people go on the internet and look for things, but how was that process?
And from, as well, like when you travel, you build a network, right? And my friend, he's a friend, like an actual friend that I met in Mexico City. He's a great person. And if it wasn't because of him and the network, like I said, that I had, I don't know how I would have fared, because again, my Spanish is not fantastic. So I would probably went to Google and I would have asked a taxi driver and I would have pointed, to this address. And then, I would have went, and it would have been the first 3 places that I went to, because true story, actually, sorry, I forgot to mention this. The first day when I was in Mexico City and they told me you need a test, I had about 7 hours before my flight. So I thought, I believed to myself that, maybe I could get something done right away and get a result in, 2 hours. So that's what I did. I literally Googled COVID test Mexico City. I jumped into a taxi and I started pointing, to the closest location. And when I would show up, there would be, I was not the only one. There was 50, 60 people in the clinic. Again, you got to walk in and I'm in a hurry and my Spanish is not perfect. And it was hectic the first 4 hours. And then I kind of just gave into the universe and said, listen, I got to stay in Mexico City. That's the way it is. I'm not going to let it kill my plans. It's no big deal. Mexico City is a great place. And, I recalibrated the situation and I called my friend and, he was really happy. So once my friend came and picked me up, it became a lot easier, once you're with someone from the country and from the city. Thankfully I had him, or else it would have been quite challenging. And I think that's why it's important to perform your due diligence, before you're going to countries, especially countries where you might not be comfortable with the language, right?
In a podcast that I just finished, we just talked about that, about how it's called the Sky Bank, about how as you go through life, and especially as a traveler, being good and keep doing good for others. And when the time comes that you need help, there you go. Your friend in Mexico City was there to help you in that situation.
Yes, sir. I mean, it worked out, and I had a great time. And like you said, sometimes the best things are not planned, and it worked out well. I got to see him, and I hadn't seen him in almost a year and a half. And so I think it happened for a reason. We reconnected and he introduced me to some of his family. So my network, of friends in Mexico City actually grew. So, there's a positive note right there.
Okay. And some of the food, what were you eating? Because Mexico has some great food, Mexico City especially.
Wow. So there's this restaurant called La Pitahaya Vegana. And it's a vegan restaurant. And, Tony, as you know, we've been discussing, I'm planning on going and changing my diet to no four-legged animals. We're going to start with no four-legged animals. So I took the opportunity to see what kind of vegan restaurants there were in Mexico City. And I'm going to tell you something, my friend. It is, I ate there 3 days in a row. Like, I'm not even joking, and usually I like to try different things. The restaurant was so good. I ate breakfast and dinner. I was there 3 days in a row. It was incredible. They had organic coffee. It was some of the best homemade Mexican food that I've ever eaten in my life. All vegan, 100% vegan. La Pitahaya Vegana. It was incredible. It's a little area called Roma, which is it's like a chic kind of town, kind of area in Mexico City. It was really cool, man. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it to anybody.
And how were the restaurants? Were they all open? Were they open partially? What's that situation like? Did they?
So again, really weird because open, but very strict on social distancing. Tables marked, no access. So everything is at least minimum 50% capacity, sometimes 30% capacity, depending on how strict they are and how they lay out the restaurant or whatnot. But, again, it gets getting used to, right? Because, we're used to walking in places and kind of sitting at any table you like. And, you want to sit by the window, no problem or whatnot. But everybody got to keep in mind that right now, it's all about, social distancing, masks, but they stay open. So I would travel. It's like you were saying before, if anybody's thinking about, I can't travel, I don't know. Yeah, travel is extremely possible. But again, you got to perform your due diligence, or you might end up in Mexico City or somewhere else for 4 days. But yeah, I mean, it's good to travel. I would, we got to get up there and live our lives. I mean, we got to be careful, but we can't leave this situation, keep us locked up at home. I mean, that's not healthy.
Okay. And you mentioned about going to the mariachi bar. So the bars are open, because here in Ecuador, we don't have bars open yet.
Okay.
So
I'm still coming.
Oh, no. Okay. No, but we have the restaurants. The restaurants are allowed to serve alcohol, but and things are put in different categories. So you might have a restaurant that is right now sometimes maybe serving a little bit more alcohol than normal. But an actual bar was just like a bar where you go in and it's just drinks or a disco or a dance club, whatever you want to call it. Those sort of places are not open. But was there actually mariachi? Were you able to go mariachi dancing and everything?
Yes, I got videos, and I mean, it was so much fun. I can tell you something. In an area called Garibaldi in Mexico City, which is one of the, I guess, the tourist attractions, and it's a square. It's Garibaldi Square. And, there's live mariachis in the square, and there's restaurants and bars, right all around. So we went there, and there's police officers on horseback, and, they have horses that you can sit on and you can take pictures on. And so the square itself was open, but again, about 30 to 40% capacity, which I don't mind. I'm not too crazy about, huge crowds, and, you can't even move around and bumping into people. And my friend who took me to Garibaldi Square, he said, George, usually this place is jammed. Like, you can't, you can't walk around. You're kind of squeezing yourself through the crowds and stuff. And on a positive note, you get a little bit more freedom, and it's a little more easy to move around. And the mariachis were out there, and the bars were open. Mexico City is a little bit unique in a way where sometimes rules don't necessarily apply to everybody or to, all clubs. And it was weird because in Garibaldi Square, when we first got there, it was past curfew for alcohol. And we were walking around, and I wanted to, I want to try some tequila and drink some mezcal and, taste a little bit of the culture. And every place we were going to, they were saying, no, no, no. And then all of a sudden, a gentleman, heard that we were looking for a place where we could enjoy some live music and potentially have a drink. And he grabbed us, he says, right over there. And there was a place in Garibaldi Square. You walk in, they serve food, they serve drinks. There's a bar, and it was live mariachis and singers, and it was awesome. I mean, I went back 2 days in a row. So.
Okay. Was it like one of those moments where you're just like, okay, what am I doing? Why should I have just stayed home?
Tony, I'm going to tell you something. There was a split second where I had doubt when I was in Mexico City and they wouldn't let me on the plane, and I was tired. I didn't get to sleep on the plane. My flight, I left around midnight from Vancouver. When I was in Mexico, I couldn't sleep. My plan was to sleep on the plane, and usually I sleep very well. I used to travel by plane to go to work, but for some reason, I don't know, maybe it was nerves or excitement, and I couldn't sleep. So I was so exhausted. And when I got to Mexico City and I tried to get on my plane to go to Lima, and they were like, no, and it seemed so difficult. And I spent like 3 hours in a taxi, driving around like crazy, going to clinics, trying to get a test, and it wasn't happening. There was a small little voice, a little bit of doubt saying, you know what, go back to Canada, go back to Canada, reorganize, wait till this COVID thing's over, whatever, and then I stopped myself, and I refocused, and I was like, look, it's not the end of the world. Sometimes things happen that are a little frustrating, and okay, you got to work through things. And sometimes to get to the pot at the end of the rainbow, it's not easy. There's no easy button in life. Things happen, and we're in a really strange time right now with this COVID. And at the end of the day, it was my fault. When I calmed down a little bit and I had something to eat at the airport and I had a little bit of water, and I was thinking to myself, at the end of the day, George, it's your fault. You didn't perform your due diligence. You didn't find out what you needed. And, these are the consequences, and that's it. There's nobody else to blame but yourself. So, put your big boy panties on and tough, suck it out, man. So that's what I did, and thankfully, like I said, I had a friend there, had I not had a friend in Mexico, I don't know, I still believe I would have stuck it out and I would have done the same thing, but I probably would not have had as much fun.
Okay. So I always, at the end of my show, I always ask for that word of advice. And it almost sounds like you gave me the answer, but if there's anything additional that you want to add as the final word.
I'd like to recap real quick by saying, look, it's not ideal traveling conditions. I'm not going to tell people it's as fun as it used to be. I used to enjoy the trip, like part of the getting there was fun, and I used to enjoy that. It's different now, so I just want people to understand that, having a face mask on your face and a shield 7-8 hours, is not fun. It's not pleasant. I don't think it's worth not traveling. Like I said, this is temporary and stuff. And yeah, I'm sitting here in the airport. I got a mask on my face for 4 hours. I'm going to be on a plane and I'm going to have a shield and a mask on for another 2 hours. But I don't think that should keep us from, living our dream or taking a trip or experiencing life. It's a speed bump, in life right now. And it's going to be over, eventually. And I would suggest to people, just perform your due diligence, know what you need to do. And, the more prepared you are, the easier it'll be. If I would have prepared, I would have chose to come anyways. Right. Okay. If I knew about the shield and everything, I would have come anyways. And it would have been easier for me, because I would have known. So again, just prepare. Don't keep this situation from letting you travel.
Okay. On that note, I will see you in a couple of hours. I guess we'll be seeing each other face to face in about 6 or 7 hours from now.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take care and see you soon.
Ciao.
Once again, thank you for listening in. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Hopefully this will be helpful for the people who are planning their holiday trip coming up, the December and January month. Hopefully we won't have to worry about this soon and we'll be back to normal. But until then, as always, George's information will be on the podcast notes if you'd like to contact him to ask him any further information. And please don't forget to subscribe so you get all the updates as soon as they come in. If you're interested in supporting this show through donations, please take a look at the podcast notes to see how you could do so. The Facebook page with the written stories, and if you're someone who likes to write or have an idea for a future podcast, please send me an email to elcafecitotraveltalks@gmail.com. Any questions, comments, or ways in which I could improve the show could also be sent to that email, which is elcafecitotraveltalks@gmail.com. For now, please stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you one day here in the El Cafecito in Cuenca, Ecuador, or in our sister location in Quito. All the best until our next show.